Wow, let's take a breath together. Good morning again. We are still talking about bursting the bubble of limitation here. And we've been marching right through it. We dealt with worthiness, the worthiness factor, which is a limitation. We dealt last week with disability. And this week we're going to be talking about perfectionism. So do we have any perfectionists in the audience? Do we have any perfectionists out there anywhere? I see quite a few hands, and I see some people raising two hands. So that must mean something. We are talking about perfectionism and perfectionism as a limitation. Anything that would hinder us, that would restrict us, that would block us in any way is a limitation. And so the things that I said last week about disability, I was saying that anything that limits us is a disability also. So anything that restricts us is a disability because we're not able to move forward and to be all that we were created to be and live our lives freely and completely. And so I started to think about perfectionism, and the topic is perfectionism, who needs it? But that's what we say up here. Because once we start going through our lives, once we start going through our daily lives and going through the things that we go through and doing whatever it is we have to do, perfectionism will kick in. The need to be right all the time. The need to do everything perfectly, whatever that means. The need to wear that mask so that we are always looking good. There's not a hair out of place. There's not a wrinkle, there's not anything that would in any way indicate something that is less than perfect. And the need to know everything, the need to not make mistakes, all of those things come up for people who have an issue with perfectionism. Now, mind you, perfectionism is different than perfection. Perfection, as Ernest Holmes says, is that which is complete, with nothing wanting, with nothing lacking. In perfectionism, there's always something lacking because we're always chasing after something, chasing after an ideal, chasing after something better, chasing after. That's what perfectionism does for us. It keeps us looking for something more, never being good enough, always being inadequate, always feeling like we are we're always being in fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of criticism. And most of it's coming from us, but we're expecting it and we're thinking it's going to be coming from outside us, from somebody else. And perfectionism is something that happens to us because of things that could have happened in childhood or the way we were raised or something that we heard or labels that we got as children or labels that we still walk around with, the ways in which we label ourselves. All these things can account for perfectionism. For me, my father was a high school principal, and I had taught myself to type when I was a little kid. And so I would work in his office sometimes, and at that time we had typewriters. That might be, I still have that one. But at that time we had typewriters, and they were not electric typewriters. And so I would work in his office sometimes, and I would type letters for him. And I would get and I was really a great typist, and I can remember I would get all the way down to the signature line and make a mistake on his name. And at that time, they didn't have the, delete. You had to have an eraser to erase it. And if I got all the way to the last letter in his name and made a mistake and erased it, and he came and read it, he'd make me do it over. And then, of course, that made me nervous. So then I'm going to make another mistake. And I don't care how many times I had to do it over. I had to do it over until it was perfect. And he really wasn't a mean man. He was a wonderful man. But that was just, my parents had very high standards, and that was just his standard. You have to do this right. I don't want and you couldn't even see that there had been an erasure. But he made it anyway. I had to do it over. And so, that kind of stuck with me from the time I was 11 years old, that I have to do this perfectly. There can't be any mistakes, there can't be any erasures, there can't be anything wrong with it. And so that translates into the way we live our lives, the way that I lived my life, always afraid of making a mistake. And that's what perfectionism does for us. We're always afraid that we're going to make a mistake, that somebody's going to call us out, that we're not good enough, or what if I can't do this? And so what that leads to, it leads us to procrastination, because we are so afraid of making a mistake, we won't even do it at all. We're so afraid of making a mistake that we will delay doing it, because we keep going over and over. We never get anything finished because it's not good enough. Because it's not good enough. We're always chasing that ideal. We're always looking for, how can I do this better? And even when we do things really great, and people tell us we do things really great, we find ways to question that. Well, maybe I could have done it better. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Maybe it could have been a little bit better than that. And we start then picking in our own minds at the things that we know, the mistakes we made, where other people have no idea. But we start picking at those kinds of things. These are the kinds of things that we do when we are dealing with perfectionism. Perfectionism, that ideal, setting those impossible standards for ourselves. Impossible standards. There's no way that we can live up to our own sense of what is perfect, because we keep moving the goalposts. I read somewhere that in perfectionism, that we walk around like there's a giant report card that's following us all around. And everything we do, we're being graded on. We're being graded on this, we're being graded on that. And it's because that's how we treat ourselves. I see perfectionism as one of the greatest forms of self-abuse, because we are constantly beating up on ourselves. We're constantly marginalizing ourselves. We're constantly telling ourselves that we aren't good enough. We're constantly living our lives like we're not good enough. We're constantly being in a place of separation, because that's what perfectionism is. It separates us. It separates us from ourselves, first of all, because we are not loving ourselves. We're not honoring ourselves. We're not accepting ourselves as we are. We certainly are not honoring that one power and that one presence in whose image and likeness we are all made. We certainly are not honoring God. We certainly are not honoring that oneness that we have with God when we are in that place of constant criticism and constant condemnation and constant fear, constant lies about ourselves. When we're doing that, then we are certainly in a place of separation. We're certainly in a place of not knowing who we are and not living up to who we are and whose we are. That's what perfectionism does for us, and who needs it? Who needs it? We don't. We really don't. We don't need to live that way any longer. And I was thinking of something, there's an old adage that says, don't let the perfect stand in the way of the good. And for many of us, you take it further, don't let the perfect stand in the way of the done. Because when something has to be perfect, we never get anything done. So when we let the perfect stand in the way of the done, then we're constantly striving towards something, working on something, never getting it finished and whatever, as I said before. So just moving into a place where we recognize that there's a difference in perfectionism and perfection. Perfection is God. God is perfection. God is perfection. Perfection already is. It's not something that we have to go seeking. It's not something that we have to try to create. It's not something that we have to try to make happen. It's something that we have to reveal. We have to reveal it. We have to take a deep breath. We have to take a step back. We have to open ourselves up and make ourselves available to it and allow perfection to reveal itself in and through and as our lives. We have to give up our attachment to what perfection looks like. Give up our attachment to what perfection looks like. Because so long as we are attached to what it looks like, we're chasing that dream again. We're chasing that rainbow. We're chasing that ideal again. When we can give up that attachment to it and we stop trying and we move into a place of allowing, we can open our minds, we can open our hearts, we can open our entire being and allow that which is already perfect to reveal itself in and through and as our lives. That's how we live in a place of perfection. That's how we live, because perfection shows up in our lives according to our own uniqueness. It shows up, and what is perfection for you is not perfection for me. However, that's how God is expressing through me. That's how God expresses through you. That's how God expresses through each one of us in a perfect manner, because God is perfect. And so knowing that truth, we can just take a deep breath, step back, and just allow ourselves to live the fully realized lives that we were created to live. A thing is perfect when it fully realizes its purpose for being designed and planned and created. We are perfect when we are living our purpose, that for which we were designed, that for which we were created. That's when we are living our perfection. That's when our perfection is showing up. We don't have to do anything but be open, show up, be available, say yes, surrender to the process, whatever it is. That doesn't mean, however, let's take a breath. That doesn't mean, however, that we don't want to be excellent. There's a difference in excellence and perfection. In perfection, we're always trying to do it right. And right always keeps moving. The goalpost keeps moving. Because what is right? What is right? How is doing it right? And so everything's got to look right, everything's got to feel right, everything's got to sound right, children's got to look right, the house got to look right, your clothes got to look right, everything's got to have the right job, you got to have all that. That's what perfectionism looks like. Excellence is being of high quality, doing things of high quality, doing the right thing in high quality according to our own uniqueness, according to who we are, according to doing our very best, according to what our best is. That's what excellence is all about. It's about doing your very best in each and every moment of each and every day. That's what excellence is, and when we are doing that, we are allowing the perfection that already is to come through. One of the other thing about, I was reminded of it, doing my best. My mother used to say, she would say, always do your best, but she would say, I don't care what you decide to be in life, but be the best there is. If you decide to be a ditch digger, be the best ditch digger there is. Do you know how difficult that is? To be the best there is? Because when you're trying to be the best there is, you're always, again, chasing after, you're shadowboxing. You're chasing after something when you're trying to be the best there is, because there's always going to be somebody that's better, or something that's better. Or at least there's the fear that there will be something that's better. And I really believe that she meant be the best that you can be, but she never said that. She just said be the best there is. Do you know how many years I spent trying to be the best there is? Do you know how many years of therapy that took? To get over never making a mistake and being the best there is. It took a lot. And sometimes I find myself, on that treadmill, on that hamster wheel, and I realize, hey, step back, take a breath, let it be. And that's what I say to all of you, to recognize that there is that within me, there is that within you, there is that within each of us, there's that divine intelligence that already knows how things are supposed to look, that already knows how we're supposed to be, that already knows what we're to do in this world, what it wants to do as our very lives. And so the most important thing that we can do always is to come back to basics, come back to our spiritual practice, come back to our alignment with the all that is, so that we can live those perfect lives. That perfect life for you, that perfect life for me. And we can't do that in a place of separation. It has to be done in a place of oneness. In a place of oneness. In a place of oneness. And the perfectionism keeps us from that place of oneness. Because it's never enough. There's never anything that's good enough when we're not in a place of oneness. And so I invite you to just take a breath and take a step back. For those who were raising both hands back there, take a step back and just be willing to let it be. Allow yourself to be all that you were created to be. Eric Butterworth said that we are all creative expressions who have a responsibility to allow our lights to shine. We have a responsibility to allow our lights to shine, and there's no way our lights can shine when we are never good enough, when we aren't allowing them to shine because we're afraid that it's not enough, that our light is not bright enough, or that person's light may be brighter than mine, and all that stuff that we get caught up in. So I am encouraging you to do 3 things. One is forgiveness. Take a breath on that. Practice self-forgiveness constantly. Practice self-forgiveness constantly. Because so long as we are in a place of perfectionism, we are abusing ourselves. So long as we're in a place of perfectionism, we're constantly telling ourselves we're not good enough. So long as we're in a place of perfectionism, we're constantly telling ourselves that we're failing, that it's not enough, that we're going to be rejected, or that we are not acceptable, or some messages that we're giving to ourselves. And so that takes us in places of blame, that takes us into places of shame, that takes us into places of guilt, that takes us into places of regret, that takes us into all of those murky places that we don't need to be. And so if we can start to practice self-forgiveness, I forgive myself for not being whatever I think perfect is. I forgive myself for not being whatever I think enough is. I forgive myself for making mistakes. Because when we're in perfectionism, we can never allow ourselves to get too tired. We can not allow ourselves to not know something. We can't allow ourselves to just relax. We got to always be on guard. When we get into self-forgiveness, we can forgive ourselves for being tired if we need to. We can forgive ourselves for not doing the best we could in any given moment. We can forgive ourselves for whatever it is that we may be holding against ourselves, whatever it is, negative messages that we may be giving ourselves. It may be a message that we got from somebody else. It may be a message that we're hearing, from the past in our ear. We're constantly hearing it, and it's constantly playing over and over and over again in our minds. We can forgive ourselves for that. We can, decide, I'm going to let this go. I'm going to let this go. I'm going to forgive myself for believing all that garbage about myself. I'm going to forgive myself for the times I haven't loved myself. I'm going to forgive myself for the times that I've allowed myself to be separate and separated from that which is my source, that lives and moves and has its being in me. I'm going to forgive myself for all the mistakes I have made and just come back into this moment, because this is the only time we have a chance to do anything different is in this moment. And so we allow ourselves to come back into this moment, take a deep breath, accept myself as I am, knowing that perfection that already is already in me. And so when I come back with that knowing, I can just open up and allow it to be revealed in and through and as my life. I'm going to forgive myself for that. When I was 6 months old, my father bought a piano. And he decided that his goal for me was to be a concert pianist at Carnegie Hall. And so my mother says that he would sit me at the piano in his lap and put my little fingers on the piano to play it so that I could one day play in Carnegie Hall. I never did. That took a lot of years of therapy also. For being that big disappointment that I didn't want to play in Carnegie Hall. That wasn't what I wanted to do, but that was his dream for me. And so it took a long time for me to recognize that I needed to forgive myself for that. I needed to forgive myself for disappointing him. He didn't talk about it, but I just felt like I had disappointed him. Because, we had that piano, and I kept the piano for years, and I moved it across country and back a couple of times. But anyway, that's another whole Oprah show. The point is, self-forgiveness was the issue for me in that regard. Giving up that feeling of being a big disappointment, giving up that feeling of not being enough, giving up all that stuff that I had nothing to do with, but it still was something that I had taken on. And it took me a while to know that in addition to psychological therapy, there was spiritual therapy that I needed. There was spiritual therapy that I needed. There was a lot of prayer work. There was a lot of meditation. There was a lot of practitioner work. There was a lot of forgiveness that I had to do, to just forgive myself for disappointing him, for not being the perfect daughter. And you know what? I was the perfect daughter. You were the perfect daughter. You were the perfect son. We were all perfect in our own unique ways because we were open and available and expressions of God. We each were. We all were. No matter what somebody else may have thought about it, be they parents or not, whatever. We were all perfect. And so when we can forgive ourselves constantly for not being that whatever that perfect means to you, that's really important for us to do that because it helps us to get into a place where we can love ourselves. And when we can be in a place of loving ourselves, we are in a place of loving God because there's no separation. And if you don't love yourself, I don't know how you can love God. And when if you love God and don't love yourself or vice versa, I don't know how that works because there's no separation. There's only one life, one love, one life, one love, not two, one. And so the forgiveness helps us to release any blocks that we may have so that we can be in a place of loving and being loving to ourselves and then to our source. And in addition to doing that, after we move into a place of forgiveness, dare to stand in your own authenticity. Dare to stand in your own authenticity. Dare to be who you are. And be the best you can be. You don't have to be the best there ever was. You don't have to be the best ever. Be the best you that you can be. That's what perfection does for us. It allows us to be the best us we can be. And the question is always coming up, is this the best I can be? Is this the best I can do in this moment? And your best changes. It changes day to day, moment by moment. My best right now may not be my best tomorrow. My best yesterday may not be my best today. Because circumstances, situations, experiences, all kinds of things happen to affect the best we can do in any given moment. The question for us is to make sure that in the moment, which is where we have to be, in the moment I can answer the question honestly, is this my best? Is this the best that I can do? Is this the best that I can be? And when we are in that place of answering that question honestly and openly, then that's when we are experiencing perfection. That's when perfection has an opportunity to flow through us, to reveal itself in and through and as our lives. When we can honestly say, I'm doing my very best. That's when we're being authentically ourselves. And that's the second thing that we have to be authentically ourselves. Be authentically ourselves, and then dare to transcend perfectionism and rise to excellence. Dare to transcend perfectionism and rise to excellence. Dare to transcend. Ernest Holmes says that the only limitation, there is no limitation but our own ignorance, and that since we all can conceive of things that take us to a greater good than we have experienced in the past, we also have the ability to transcend the past experiences and live a greater life. If we recognize that there is no limitation but our own ignorance, and since we can all conceive of a greater good than we've experienced in the past, then we all have the ability to transcend the past. We have the ability to transcend our limitations. We have the ability to transcend perfectionism. We have the ability to move beyond it. And I say rise from there into excellence. That's the greater good for each of us. Rising to excellence. Rising to be those fully realized beings that we were created to be. God knows exactly why we were created, what it wants to do through us. And to the degree that we can open up and allow it, that's when excellence shows up in our lives. That's when excellence shows up. That's when our very best shows up. And so when we are committed to doing that, when we are committed to being all that we were created to be, when we are committed to letting our lights shine, then we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to have that perfectionism that plagues us. Perfectionism can be debilitating. Excellence can be motivating because we're striving to do our very best. And only we know what that is. But that's what's motivating us. That's what's inspiring us. That's what's inspiring us. That's what's motivating us, the desire to be excellent. The desire to be perfect can be scary, it can be limiting, it can be restrictive. As I said, it can be debilitating. And so we want that always makes us rise up. We want that always makes us open up. We want that always makes us shine and allows us to shine and allows us to be all that we were created to be. And that's what happens when we tune into that one power, to that one light, to that one presence, to that one mind, to that one life, to that one love, to that one breath, to that one source, God. That's home for us. Let's return home now to that place where we can be free, to that place where we can be our most comfortable, to that place where we can relax, take a breath, and know that all indeed is well, because we have returned home. We return unto God. Their perfection already is, and their perfection reveals itself as our very lives. So perfectionism, you don't need it. Let it go. Let it go. Let's all make a commitment to let it go. How many people? That's pretty, okay, that's good. Well, how many people are just willing to let it go? All right, good. Just keep working on that willingness to let it go, willingness to let it go, willingness to let it go. And then we let it go. And as we do so, look out. Look out, because then God shows up. And when God shows up, look out. Because you want to let God show up and show out in your life. That's what we want in our lives. We want God to show up and to show out. Not only in our individual lives, but in the life of this community. And as God shows up and shows out as each one of us, God shows up and shows out as Creative Living Fellowship also. It's all one. It's all one. It's all one. It's all God. Let's take a breath as we turn within in this moment. And so just moving into that place of oneness, that place of oneness that is within each one of us, that place where we know and sense and feel the presence of the one, knowing that there's but one life, one breath. We allow this one breath to breathe us in this moment. Not limiting it by trying to hold it back, not limiting it by trying to ignore it, just allowing it to flow in and through us. Knowing that this one lives and moves and has its being in each one of us, and we live and move and have our being in it. Perfect God, perfect being, perfect man, perfect life, This is what is available to each one of us. And so as we open up, we allow the allness and the fullness that is God to be revealed in and through and as our lives. And as we do this, I speak the word for each one of us this day, knowing that this one life that is our very life, it's coursing through us right now. And I can speak the word into this one law, this one life, this one mind, this one presence. Speaking a word of healing for each one of us, healing on every level of our being. Whether it's in the body temple, whether it's in our bodies of affairs, whether it's in financial affairs, whether it's health, whatever it may be, relationships. That one power, that one presence, that one life, that one mind is the healing presence that is within each of us. And we can release and let go of anything that is unlike it, anything that appears to hinder or block or restrict or encumber in any way. We release it by this word that's being spoken here right now. And as we do so, we create a space for that perfection that already is to flow in and through us and as our very lives. Our lives begin to take off like never before. We get to experience it like we've never experienced life before. We get to show up in ways that we haven't shown up before. We get to live a life that we were created to live. As I open this circle of prayer, I pause momentarily so you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer this day. You may speak their names silently or loud, and you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I'm just knowing absolutely that God is in the midst of everything that's going on everywhere. Where there's loss, God is there. Where there's unrest, God is there. Where there appears to be lack, God is there. God is in the midst of everything. Thank you, Father, Mother God. As this prayer goes out to anyone on this planet needing a prayer this day, knowing that in the midst of every situation, every circumstance, God is. That's all we ever need to know, is that God is. Thank you, Infinite Presence. Thank you, Divine Mother. I'll just allow it to be now. And so it is.